You're listening to the podcast of Rain City Church.
Hey, what's up, guys? Pastor Mark here. Just want to take a second real quick to tell you about what's coming up this Sunday at the Zone Station House. It's going to be epic, guys. We're going to have pizza. There's going to be games everywhere. Games in the parking lot, games in the annex, in the fellowship hall, Jenga with the big blocks that comes up higher than normal Jenga, backed by popular demand, sumo suits. Text my wife, Gina, if you want to bring your own cornhole set. She's coordinating all of that and just doing a fantastic job. She's so hot and doing such a great job with that. We just want to thank her. Give her a hug, a side hug if you see her. Don't forget to bring your pagan friends who would otherwise be out, doing drugs and having sex and kicking little kids. We want to show them how God parties, guys. We want to show them what it looks like to have pizza and games. It's going to be so amazing, guys. I promise you this, guys. Count on this. As soon as you guys really start having fun and you're like having a good time with your friends, I'm probably going to pull you all together to listen to some older adults talk for like 45 minutes. Senior pastor Steve's going to be there in jeans, and then I'm going to get all the guys and girls in the same room for a little while, and we've got a special presentation. I'm just so honored and so humbled that we will have with us former minor league baseball player Scott Skontos. He's going to be sharing about how God almost used him as a baseball player. At 9:30, guys, we're going to be staying up. We're going to be projecting a PG-13 movie on the gymnasium wall. Don't worry, we're cutting out all the bad parts. Pizza, guys. Movie, guys. Games, guys. It's going to be amazing. Last thing, don't forget to bring your $20 for the upcoming Myrtle Beach trip. Let's really make our summers count, guys, by helping some starving people with their theology. Signing off, this is Pastor Mark. I love all of you very much.
Pastor Mark, everybody. Pastor Mark. Oh my gosh, that guy is so funny. It's a joke if you're new here that man is not employed at Rain City Church. Hey, my name is Jesse. I am one of the pastors here, and we started last week. We get to over the next few weeks just talk about who we are and why we do what we do. We started last week by talking about sort of this new direction, this new vision, this new plan that we're heading down, and I thought that would be a perfect video to show, because why is that video so funny? Because it's so accurate, right? I mean, if you grew up in church, there's a very good chance that all of those things resonate. Because what is, evangelical church especially, is based on this. Put your butt in a seat on a Sunday or a Wednesday and bring a friend, right? And then if other things happen, that's great, but that's how you really know if you're winning. Get people there. Try to give them some kind of experience, and then if they raise a hand, or if you're from a church where they come forward or whatever it was, that's how you know you're really winning. And we saw that. I'm not saying that that's ineffective. I just think it's not that effective anymore. I think maybe that had a season, but I feel like that season is done, and that we are really looking at how do we help one another experience God in the everyday. That's what we want. That is our vision here at Rain City Church. We want to experience God in the everyday, in your ordinary life. In fact, it comes from Romans chapter 12 from the Message translation, which says this. So here's what I want you to do. God helping you take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work, walking around life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. We want to help you learn how to experience God throughout the everyday experiences of your life. However mundane that may look, we want to help you realize and recognize that every moment can be a holy moment when we just turn that switch, when we recognize just how present God is in that moment with us. So this is kind of what the whole house looks like. It was up there just a minute ago. So you've got our vision at the top, our purpose, our values, and our practices. This is sort of, we're kind of calling it the house because this is sort of the structure. This is how it's all working together toward one thing. Someone pointed out, though, the other day that it looks a little bit like an Illuminati thing. And so I'm just here to say that that's true. We've finally joined the Illuminati, everyone. When I first moved up here 15 some years ago, I was at another church and we started a service called the Illuminate service. This is not a joke. We had 4 or 5 people over about a 2-month period come to the service and pull us aside afterwards and say, like absolutely straight-faced, is this actually a part of the Illuminati? And which we always said, yes, it is. Tell your friends. So, today, I want to walk us through kind of, again, sort of what all of this looks like. Our purpose is this, we exist to help people experience God in the everyday through discovering what it means to be loved by Him, to belong to and build an authentic community, compelling us to become a positive force, achieving our God-given potential. It's a lot of words. Easier way to remember it is simply this: be loved, belong, become. We're gonna dig into this a little bit more today. So that is our purpose. I want to talk a little bit about our practices because this is new. Our practices is we are introducing some spiritual practices. Our values is next, right? Our values, we're going to talk about next week: authenticity, inclusivity, generosity, creativity, reciprocity. And then our practices. Our practices are brand new to how we are going to introduce that rhythm into the life of our church and just our everyday lives. We will be the spiritual practice of responding, releasing, renewing, investing, centering, and enlightening. And so for 2 months of every year, we as a church will be practicing these together in practical ways, not just in, hey, we might talk about it on a Sunday. So especially through your app, if you haven't downloaded the app, would really encourage you to do that. Make sure you turn on the notifications. You can choose, by the way, which notifications you want. So if there's, if you don't have a kid in the kids ministry, then you can turn that off. But there's different ones. I would really highly recommend that you do that. And if you do it here, you just have to turn off the Wi-Fi because the Bellevue High School Wi-Fi blocks, for some reason, getting that. Illuminati. And so I want to talk about today, though, our purpose and where this came from. Really where this came from was from the story of the woman caught in adultery from the book of John. If you know the Gospels, it's a famous story. If you don't know the Gospels, some of this might ring a bell because it is a famous story. This is one of my favorite stories. I feel like I say that every time I talk about a Jesus story, though. I am absolutely enamored by this person of Jesus. I am often disgusted by the greater body of the church. I think that there's a lot of things that we are just really messing up on, and that there are things that, and even, here, we're not perfect. There's lots of stuff that we could correct. And it's easy to skew negative all the time until you sit down and you just revisit the Gospels again. And you just look at what it means to be known by Jesus, to be loved by Him, to belong to a community that really puts Jesus first, to put Jesus in the center of it all. And so this story, I feel like, does such a great job of that. This is a story of the woman caught in adultery. Again, John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. On your app, if you hit Sundays on the bottom and then go to message notes, you can read it there. If you're a kind of a note taker or fill in the blank person, that'll be there for you. If not, it's all on the screen here as well. So picking it up in chapter 8, verse 1. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives. Now just remember that. There's a reason why that's there. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him, into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." I've been saying this for years, and I still think that this is absolutely true. We love, particularly if you call yourself a Christian and follower of Jesus, if you're reading the Bible, we love to always put ourselves on Team Jesus. And I think that's because that's what we always aspire to. That's what we want to be, right? However, I think we can get the most out of these readings of the Gospels when we see ourselves in the people that Jesus is coming up against, the people that Jesus is trying to challenge and teach. So I would encourage you, as you read particularly the Gospels, that you don't take yourself out of the hot seat. That instead you put yourself in the hot seat of those religious people and say, where are my religious tendencies? Where are the places that I find myself too close to the religious people of the time, the quote-unquote church people, if you will? Because all of us have that tendency. In fact, if you look at it, I would call it the religious response. The religious response looks like this. It's right here in that passage, and it's this: look good or get caught. Right? That's where it begins. That's where it starts. You better look good, because if you don't look good, then what happens? You'll get caught. That is the whole point of sort of this religious system that they've set up. It's not be good so that you can reap the rewards of being good or live a blessed life, right? It's look good so that you don't get caught. And that's what we see here in the story with this woman, is that she did something wrong and then she was caught. And then it goes on, right? So what's the moral of the story here? Don't get caught, right? Look good so you don't get caught. Not be good, not try to really partner with God and let Him transform your life. Just look good. Don't mess up, and if you do, just don't do it publicly, right? Clear your browser history. We're all good. Wink, okay? Look good or get caught. Fit in or be exposed. Because, man, if you get caught and you stick out, you're no longer in. You will be exposed. That is the religious response that lives in every single one of us, is that it's just fierce tribalism, right? We're seeing this all across the country right now. That if there's a certain type of person or people that don't fit into our certain type of circle or bubble or whatever, then they will be exposed, right? They've gotten caught. We're going to let them know about it. And now you can see that they're not fitting in. And so therefore, we will make them known. We will make them known to everyone else that these people do not belong in this place because they are not one of us. And then, finally, is if you do happen to find yourself caught and exposed, then you better shift the blame or you'll be judged. Because that's exactly what the religious people are doing. They see no blame in themselves. They're shifting the blame onto this woman, onto someone that they know is a very easy target. We love to do this. I mean, the church as a whole loves to do this. We will usually find a people group that is usually has been, underserved or abused or whatever over the years. I mean, you can look back in church history and just start picking it out over the, of who it is. But we find some people group, and then we blame them. They're the reason. They're the reason why the church is what it is. They're the reason why the nation is what it is. They're the reason why, right? It's them. It's not us. We're doing great, right? We go to parties with pizza and big Jenga, okay? We're doing awesome right now. Maybe this reminds you a lot of, if you have church history, maybe this reminds you of a church that you went to or grew up in. It reminds me of a church that I was in for a little while. We moved to Northern California when I was about 11. And the church that we were in, were literalists when it came to the Bible. And so they took everything that was in there and just sort of discounted any cultural context and just said, this is exactly the way it should be. And so there's a part in where Paul talks about, hey, if there's transgression, there's sin, there's some strife going on in the community, that person needs to get up and talk about it in front of people. Well, I personally do not believe that Paul was thinking of, when you have a church of 500 plus, make sure you find that person and make him get up. Well, that's what happened in the church I was in. There was a kid who was a little bit older than, I guess he was about 16 because he had his driver's license. And he and his friend, there was this whole thing. We grew up in a pretty small town. It's called Grass Valley. And it was in, the Union, as most of you probably read the Union, the local paper of Grass Valley. And it was in the Union that there is a problem with someone destroying mailboxes. Right? Someone would go by and use a baseball bat and just smash those mailboxes, okay? Couldn't figure out who it was. Well, they finally found out who it was, and the way they found out was because this person ended up in the ER with a broken jaw. Because one time they went up to a mailbox, and it was like a reinforced steel mailbox, and the bat came right back at him and hit him in the face when they were going, 20, 30 miles per hour down the road. Now, that kid, he went to my church, okay? So, they bring him up on stage with his jaw wired shut so that his dad could tell everybody what his son has done in the church. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. And if you have any psychology background, even if you don't, you can probably start connecting the dots. His dad was a mailman. Wonder why he's taking all his anger out on the mailboxes. It's odd. So his dad, Mailman Joe, gets up there and he starts talking about all the things that his son has done. And then his son has to, through a wired jaw, like, please forgive me for ruining all of your mailboxes. And, and so we as a congregation, it's like Gladiator at that point. We're like, no, and everybody sure is like, oh, yes, you are forgiven, you are forgiven. However, you shall forever carry the mark of the mailbox beater. And so that's the story I'm telling you now. I don't know whatever happened to that kid. I don't remember any other context with that kid. All I remember is that's the kid that ruined the mailboxes. And so I learned a very important lesson that day as I sat there like dying 1,000 deaths for this kid on stage. And it was simply this. I really hope nobody ever finds out that I'm illegally dealing blow pops in the back of my bus. I will probably have to stand up in front of the whole church and confess my sin. Don't get caught. Do not get caught. Look good. Fake it. Fake it till you make it. Just make sure everybody thinks that you're good, and then you're good. This lives in every single one of us. This is the human response, right? The tribalism, the sense that if I can't fit in, then I will die. Like we must be in groups together. I need to belong to something. And so what do? Well, I'm just going to change. I'm just going to try to fit in. I'm just going to try to shift into this little cookie cutter right here. Even though I'm more like this thing over here, I can't be that thing because I have to be this thing so these people don't kick me out. So I'm not caught. So I'm not exposed. So I'm not judged. So I'm not condemned. That's the religious response. Jesus, however, comes in with something so refreshing and different. However, there's three major problems with the response of the Pharisees. Number one is this. Why are they demanding that she be stoned? They're talking about the law of Moses. If you look at religious history, they had not practiced this for over 1,000 years. So they are simply saying this woman needs to be stoned because they're trying to get Jesus caught, right? They're trying to trap him. That's really the reason why. The other thing that's really tough about this, the reason why it's a trap, is because Roman law, which the Romans ruled Israel at the time, Roman law prohibited that. You could not kill another person, right? So if you know the story of Jesus, that's why the religious people had to get the Romans on board in order to crucify Jesus. They couldn't do it themselves. They needed the Romans to come on board and to actually be the ones that crucify Jesus, because that was the law of the time. Number two problem, why are they bringing her to Jesus in the first place? Because they should have brought her to a place called the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the council. They were the sort of the religious rulers of the time. That's where she should have been brought to, so she could bring her case, they could bring their case, and say, we got a problem, this woman needs to be judged, condemned, whatever it is, right? Why are they bringing her to Jesus? Again, problem number two, well, it's simple. They're trying to trap him, right? There's not any pure response in these people to bring them to Jesus. And then third, the biggest major problem with this entire thing. Can anybody tell me who is missing in this story? The dude. You can't commit adultery alone, you know? It takes two, man. Like, so if it says several times, she was caught in the act. And then there's a naked dude running around, like, I got away again, like, she's slow, we caught her though, like what? Why is that? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons why. I mean, it was very, especially in this culture, women were not valued at all. And that's why, again, Jesus is so revolutionary that even at the end of this, have a one-on-one conversation with a woman who was just caught in adultery. Like that did not happen. You did not want anything to do with those people, especially if you said you were after a God mission, which Jesus claimed constantly. And so these religious people were very, very upset at Jesus because he continued to bring this new type of God relationship. This God that he talked about was very different than this judgmental, angry, I shall strike you down, you shall feel my wrath and justice God that these religious people loved. Why do they love? Because that's the kind of God that keeps you in line. You mess up, bam! Right? Still, people to this day, when I invite them to church, they say, man, it sounds pretty cool, but I'm pretty sure I'd be struck by lightning the second I stepped in. I'm like, we meet at a high school. There's like literally kids vaping dope outside in the parking lot. And they're youth kids here, like, come on in. One of them's my kid. But he shares, it's fine. So, it's a joke. Relax. Why? Why are they doing this to Jesus? It is simple. They are trying to trap Jesus, right? They have Jesus in a real jam. They have put Jesus in a dilemma. They have Jesus in a classic pickle. Like they have put Jesus in an old-fashioned quagmire. I mean, they're putting Jesus between a rock and a hard place. Like Jesus is in a catch-22. Like Jesus is in, as the British would say, a sticky wicket. I have 40 of these. Keep going. Okay. This was like Thursday. It was late, and that just seems so funny to me. I should just keep going on that. And apparently late Thursday night humor doesn't work on Sunday morning. Jesus is stuck here because, as we mentioned, just to remind you why it's so sticky is because, number one, Jesus is a friend of sinners. And now here he is right in front of this woman who has been caught in a sin. That is a sin. I think all of us would still agree. Like adultery, that rips families apart. I don't know if you, I personally know what that is like. I don't know if you do, or maybe you have friends or whatever, but it sucks. There's a reason why God is trying to set up some barriers there to say, don't do this. This is really tough. It's tough on families, it's tough on kids, it's tough on communities. It's not a good thing. So Jesus isn't saying, okay, But he's stuck because the law of Moses commands that she be stoned. Which, by the way, I read up on this. I'd never seen this before. There's a book called the Mishnah, which is an old Jewish book, which is commentary on Old Testament law. And if the dude were to be caught, instead of being stoned, he would have been tied up and then buried up to above his knees in cow dung. Look it up. And then he would have basically a wet towel wrapped around his neck to where there would be a person on each side, and they would just keep tugging him back and forth until he was strangled, and then he would fall into the poo to die. So this is an awesome culture, okay? I mean, creative. I would... Okay. So that's what would happen. But the law of Moses says, don't do it. Jesus is she has to be stoned. That's the law of Moses. And then the Old Testament says that if he breaks the law of Moses, then he is not actually a prophet. He is actually not a messenger from God. So they know they've got him trapped. But if he says yes to it, then he's breaking Roman law. And Roman law, again, says you can't do that. You can't kill people. You can't, capital punishment is not okay. So he's stuck in an old-fashioned pickle. Sticky wicket. So what does Jesus do? The Jesus response, which I hope would be all of our responses. He starts with this. He starts with love. He leads with love. Always be our first step, to lead with love. Right? I think one of the most brilliant things Jesus ever said is, what would you want people to do to you? Why don't you do that? Because, man, we all mess up, every single one of us. And if we don't lead with love towards others, then guess what? We just get classified right in with all the other religious people in the easy responses. Jesus starts with love. Be loved through the daily discovery of God's love for you and for all of mankind. This isn't just a you and God thing. This is an all of us thing, right? One thing I love about this community is that we do a very good job of this. I have watched so many times as people who are going through really, really tough stuff are just constantly welcomed with open arms. And it's clear that, I think as a community, we're not saying, hey, just whatever. You do whatever, you do you know that there'll always be a place here. What we're saying is there will always be a place here, and let's come together and figure out how we can become something better, which we'll talk about in a second. But you lead with love. You start with love. A lot of times leading with love means listening, leading with your ears, questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling? This doesn't seem like you. What's going on? Tell me about where you're at. It starts with love. For some of you, if you're new, you're thinking, yeah, this sounds great. I just don't know how to kind of jump into that. One of the great ways is through something called a Connect event. We hold Connect events several times throughout the year. There's one coming up on October 3rd, which is a Thursday night at 7 p.m. at the lab, which is our offices, which is just a few miles away from here. This is a great way, whether you're new or whether you've been around here for a long time. We continue to grow. We are running out of chairs pretty consistently. On Sundays, you guys heard about just the mass amount of children that are down in Kids Hall. So if you want to meet new people, this is a great way to do it. We keep it light, we keep it fast moving. It's just a lot of games and how are you and tell us your name, what's your biggest sin, and then we just kind of and we just keep it moving, and so. But it's a great way. It's a great way to get to know people. That one's coming up. You can mark on your the connection card or the next steps, on the app. There's a way to mark that clearly there. And then If you would like to host a supper club, we're in that season right now of getting people a place that they can come that's a safe place. So if you would be available and able to host a supper club, again, we are looking for a few more people. As we go into October, we as an entire church from first through adults will be going through the book of Acts together. And so we will make sure that you have what you need to be able to have some great conversations together as a group. The next thing that Jesus does, that he models, is that she has a place to belong. Because what is so obvious about what's happening right there? She's so completely on the outside. There's a whole bunch of men who are in power who come and bring this woman, the man, whatever, but the woman, they can put her out, they can say, and then she's on the outside. And so on the outside, they're saying, let's kill her. And it's interesting to see Jesus' response. He just ignores them, which is, by the way, I think the best response to religious people. If you are on Facebook or Reddit or Instagram or Twitter or anything where you can respond to people who are a-holes, don't. Ignore them. Because guess what you look like when you respond? An a-hole. Okay? So, it's better to ignore them. Go live your life. Lead with love by the way that you live, not by trying to prove a point, right? The greatest point that you can prove is by loving other people. So he says, come on, belong. Belong to and build an authentic and diverse community where you can be honest and invite others into that place because it's safe. Because it's a place where we really can be who we are. We do this great on Sunday mornings. You guys do such an incredible job. And as Kelsey talked about, there's all kinds of places that you can sign up to serve, to get involved, to keep Sunday mornings happening. And so I would really encourage you, go on the app, hit the next steps, and you can sign up to host a group. You can sign up to serve in kids. There's other opportunities there. But really, really, really encourage you to help us continue to make this a safe place for people who are coming to see if it really is safe. Does Jesus really exist? Can we trust these people? This is a great place to do that. And then finally, Jesus says become. Become the person that God uniquely created you to be. By doing the hard work to unearth your God-given potential instead of taking shortcuts, easy fixes, and consistent wrong turns. Okay? This is what sin means. Sin means a wrong turn. It means you're off course. It means you're off aim. And so Jesus says, I'm not condemning you, but I am saying there's a better way to live. Become what God created you to be. Experience that God-given potential that you have in your life. Because so many of us, I think, end up feeling stuck. We get stuck in life, and we all have this feeling that that's where it's always going to be. Now, remember I said, remember that it says that he returned to the Mount of Olives, right? Why is that in there? Why does it give it? Well, number one, because it's saying this is a real place, this is a real person at a real time, okay? But secondly, why does it say this? Well, it says this because there's something very interesting about the Mount of Olives. A lot of different things happened at the Mount of Olives with Jesus. Jesus taught there. Jesus was challenged there. They attempted to trap him there. Jesus prayed there many times. Jesus was betrayed there in the Mount of Olives. And what's really interesting is that according to the book of Zechariah in the Old Testament, the prophecy tells us that when Jesus returns, he will return to the Mount of Olives. Now, why do I bring all of that up? Because some of you might find yourself in a different stage at the Mount of Olives. Some of you might find yourself in a stage where you've got a lot of people around and you feel like you're fitting in, that this is happening. Some of you might feel like you're totally on the outside. Some of you might feel betrayed by someone. Some of you might feel so close to God right now that that's where you're at. Some of you might feel like you're so far on the outside. Wherever you're at, I want you to remember that God is always at work. You can't stop. You can't just allow yourself to get stuck because you are experiencing so many wrong turns in your life that you feel like it's hopeless. You'll never get anywhere anymore. If Jesus felt that way, he would have never actually fulfilled the plan that God the Father had for him. Because God is always at work, even in that single place of geography in the life of Jesus. Everything, so many incredible things happened there. Where are you at today in your life? Where do you feel like you are stuck? One of the things that I think gets us really stuck is that we live with unconfessed sin. That we live with stuff that we're so desperately trying to hide because we've seen other people just get destroyed by it. That we live with this fear that if anybody actually knew me, they would know that I don't actually belong here. They would know that I need to be, I'm out. They would know who I really am. And if we as a community are trying to lead with love and show what the Jesus response is, then we must show that this is a safe place to really be you. And let's figure this out together. You won't have all the answers, but you certainly have the love inside of you to respond.
We hope you enjoyed this message. For more information and resources, go to RainCityChurch.com. Thanks for listening.